She thought no one cared, until the cowboy stopped. The prairie one howled like a restless ghost stirring the red dust of the forgotten trail. A young girl stood by the roadside, barefoot, dirt-streaked, clutching a tin canteen that had long run dry. Her name was Éliane Rousse, and she hadn't spoken a word in 3 days. The sky above her stretched wide and pitiless, a cruel blue that mocked her hunger. In the distance, a trail of dust shimmered, a lone rider moving slow but sure toward the dying sun. She didn't move, not when the horse's shadow lengthened over her, not when the creak of leather and the jingle of spurs broke the silence. The rider drew close, a weathered cowboy with silver hair under a black hat. His face was a map of old pain, and his name was Colt Mercier. He reined in his horse, his eyes narrowing as they settled on the girl's trembling frame. Lost, miss? His voice carried a weight that made the air still. Éliane lifted her eyes, cracked lips barely forming a whisper. Ain't lost, just forgotten. The words hung between them like smoke, fragile, haunting, true. Colt stared at her for a long, quiet moment and swung down from his saddle. Reckon nobody's truly forgotten, he said softly, offering her his canteen. Not while someone's still riding through the dust. Éliane hesitated, her eyes flicking to the horizon, where no one had ever come for her before. She took the canteen with shaking hands. The first sip burned her throat, but the warmth in his gaze burned deeper. Behind them, the wind carried a whisper, the sound of hooves approaching fast. And for the first time, Colt Mercier's hand drifted toward his holster. The echo of hooves came low and heavy, rolling across the plains like distant thunder. Colt Mercier's eyes sharpened beneath his hat brim. He could tell by the rhythm. 2 riders, maybe 3, pushing fast. Trouble never traveled alone out here. Éliane clutched the empty canteen to her chest, eyes wide. They're coming, she whispered, voice trembling like a trapped bird's wings. Colt's jaw tightened. He'd heard fear like that before, the kind that came from being hunted, not lost. Who's after you, girl? He asked, but she only shook her head, tears cutting thin rivers through the dust on her cheeks. If I tell you, they'll find you too. The wind kicked up, snapping at Colt's long duster coat. He looked out toward the sun, now bleeding red, across the ridgeline. Then he stepped forward and placed his weathered hand on her shoulder, steady, firm. You let me worry about that. Moments later, 3 horsemen emerged from the haze, their faces half hidden by bandanas and dust. The one in front, a broad man with a scar across his chin, called out, "We're looking for the girl. Little thief's got something that ain't hers." Éliane's breath caught. Colt's hand drifted back toward his revolver. "Far as I see," he said calmly, "she's got nothing but the clothes on her back and the dust in her hair." The scarred man grinned, the kind of grin that promised violence. "Then you won't mind if we check your saddlebags, old man?" Colt smiled, slow, cold. "You can check them," he said, "if you can still stand afterward." Then the silence snapped. 3 gunshots tore through the dusk. Dust exploded around the rider's boots. Colt moved like a man born in war. No hesitation, no mercy. His revolver sang once, twice, 3 times. When the echo died, only 1 horseman still breathed, crawling backward through the dust. Colt holstered his gun. Éliane stared at him, her body trembling. "You killed them," she whispered. He met her gaze, quiet and unflinching. "No," he said. "They killed themselves when they came for a child." The last rider dragged himself upright, wheezing. "She's not just a child," he spat. "She's..." A single crack of thunder. Colt's revolver spoke again, silencing him forever. The wind swallowed the smoke. Colt turned to the girl. "You've got a story to tell, Éliane Rousse," he said softly, "and I figured it's time someone finally listened." Night fell like ink over the open plains. A small fire flickered beside the trail, its light dancing across Colt's weathered face. Éliane sat close to the flames, knees drawn to her chest. Her voice came small, careful, as if the dark itself might listen. They weren't lying. I did take something, but not what they think. Colt leaned back against a rock, eyes glinting beneath his hat brim. Go on? She pulled from her satchel a small wooden box, cracked, old, and carved with strange markings. It was my mother's, she whispered, before they burned the farm, before they took everything. She opened it, and inside was a folded paper, brittle with age. Colt reached out, the firelight catching the edges of what looked like a map, or maybe a promise. The words written across it read, "The blood of the plains shall rise again." Colt frowned. Your ma part of the old resistance? Éliane nodded, her eyes heavy with grief. They called her the widow of Saint-Denis. Said she hid something powerful. They think I know where. Colt stared into the fire for a long moment. Well, he said finally, looks like you and me just became a problem for powerful men. She looked up, her small voice cracking. Why are you helping me? He smiled faintly. Because once there was someone no one stopped for, and I swore I'd never ride past again. The fire popped. Somewhere in the dark a coyote howled, and for the first time in a long while, Éliane Rousse felt like maybe she wasn't forgotten after all. The dawn broke red and restless, spreading light over a land that had forgotten how to forgive. Colt Mercier rode slow beside Éliane, their horses kicking up trails of ghostly dust through the hollow silence of the plains. The girl kept clutching the old wooden box to her chest, as if it were the last piece of herself she still believed in. In the distance, a cluster of ruins rose from the horizon. Blackened timbers, a church steeple broken clean in half, and a windmill that moaned when the wind touched it. A weathered sign leaned sideways, half buried in dust. Saint-Denis. Population gone. Éliane's breath caught. This was home, she said quietly. Her voice cracked like thin glass. Before the fire, Colt dismounted first, boots sinking into the ash-strewn soil. The smell of burnt wood and old sorrow still lingered, years after the flames had gone cold. What happened here? He asked. She pointed to the charred church. They came from my mother. Said she'd hidden gold, or secrets, or something they feared, but she wouldn't tell, so they made sure no one else could either. Colt's jaw clenched. He'd seen this before, not gold, not greed, but power cloaked in the name of justice. You said they burned the farm, he murmured. Who are they, Éliane? Her eyes darkened. Men who ride with red scarves around their necks. They call themselves the Crimson Law. My mother said they answer to no sheriff, only to the shadows. A wind swept through the ghost town, scattering ash like snow. The sound of a loose door creaking made Colt's hand twitch toward his holster. He turned. A man stood in the doorway of the church, tall, coat torn, eyes wild with fever. A crimson scarf fluttered at his throat. Mercier, the man rasped, voice broken. Didn't think you ride back to Saint-Denis. Colt froze. The name hit like a hammer. I don't know you, he said low. The man smiled, slow, bitter. Oh, but I know you. You left her, Colt, the widow of Saint-Denis. You left her to burn. Éliane's eyes widened. You knew my mother? Colt's silence said enough. The man laughed, the sound cracked and cruel. You ride with her ghost now? How fitting. She thought you'd come back for her, Mercier. Right up to the moment the fire took her voice. Colt's revolver was in his hand before thought could form. One motion, clean as breath. But the man didn't flinch. He just spread his arms wide, like a preacher at the gallows. Go on, he whispered out. You're good at leaving things dead. Colt hesitated, finger trembling on the trigger. Éliane stepped forward, tears streaking down her face. Stop, she cried. Please, no more. The The man dropped to his knees, coughing blood. The Crimson Law's coming, girl. They'll finish what they started. And that box you hold, it's the match to light the world again. Then he fell, his final breath rattling through the ruins of Saint-Denis. For a long time, neither Colt nor Éliane spoke. The wind carried the smell of ashes, old sins, and something deeper, truth. Finally, Colt looked at her. His voice was low, rough as gravel. You deserve the truth. I knew your mother once. He paused. She saved my life, and I couldn't save hers. Éliane's eyes glimmered with pain. Then why help me now? Colt holstered his gun, staring toward the rising sun bleeding through the smoke. Because this time, I won't ride away. The sun was high by the time they left the ruins of Saint-Denis. The plain stretched endless before them, golden, cruel, silent. Colt Mercier rode ahead, his eyes hard beneath the brim of his hat. Éliane followed close behind, clutching the wooden box that had already cost too much blood. Every mile brought more questions than answers. Colt could feel them pressing in, like ghosts that refused to rest. The widow of Saint-Denis, her name had once been a prayer on his tongue. Now, it was a wound that never healed. You said you knew her, Éliane called softly. The wind stole most of her words. What was she like? Before it all burned. Colt didn't answer right away. His gaze fixed on the horizon, a blur of heat and memory. Strong, he said at last. Too strong for a world that didn't want her kind of hope. She believed people could still do good, even men like me. Éliane looked down at the box in her lap. Then maybe she left this for you, she said quietly. Before Colt could reply, a sound rose behind them, faint at first, then growing, the rhythmic thunder of hooves, many hooves. The Crimson Law was coming. Ride, Colt barked, spurring his horse forward. The land came alive in a storm of dust and panic. Éliane clung to her reins as the wind whipped her hair, and the world blurred into chaos. Behind them, shouts tore through the air. Mercier! Hand over the girl. Bullets screamed past. One struck the ground beside Colt's horse, spraying dirt across his boots. He turned in the saddle, drew, and fired twice, clean and fast. 2 riders fell, swallowed by their own dust. But there were too many, too fast. Up ahead, the land dipped into a narrow canyon. Steep walls, tight turns. Colt knew it well. He'd hidden here once before, when lawmen had worn different colors. This way, he shouted. They plunged into the canyon, the air cool and echoing. Gunfire chased them down the walls, sparking off stone. Éliane's horse stumbled, nearly throwing her, but Colt reached back, catching her wrist, pulling her upright without missing stride. When they reached the bend, Colt swung out of the saddle. Keep riding, he yelled. Don't stop, no matter what. She looked at him, terror flooding her eyes. What are you doing? Ending what I started. He slapped her horse's flank. It bolted down the canyon, carrying her and the box toward the river beyond. Colt turned, loaded his last 2 rounds, and waited as the Crimson Law thundered into view. Their leader, a hulking man in a red scarf and black gloves, pulled his horse to a stop. You've gone soft, Mercier, he sneered. Hiding behind children now? Colt's eyes narrowed. Better than killing them. The man laughed, harsh, metallic. That girl carries something worth dying for, so let's not make her wait. The canyon went still. The wind stopped. The only sound was the slow, deliberate click of Colt Mercier's revolver. Then, lightning. Gunfire roared through the stone corridor. Dust and echoes swallowed everything. When it was done, the canyon was quiet again, except for one voice, faint and trembling. Éliane. She turned back. She ran toward the smoke, tears streaking through the dirt on her face. Colt, she cried. Colt. When she reached him, he was still on his knees, hat fallen, blood soaking through his sleeve. His revolver hung loose in his hand. Around him, 6 men lay dead. The last one, the leader, groaned, half alive. Colt turned his head, a small crooked smile breaking through the pain. Told you. I wasn't gonna ride away this time. Éliane dropped beside him, sobbing. We have to go. They'll send more. Colt nodded weakly. Then you need to finish what your mother started. He looked at the wooden box still clutched in her trembling hands. Whatever's in there, it's why she died. It's why they're coming. Then his eyes met hers, fierce, unbroken. Don't let him take it, Éliane. Not ever. She nodded, tears blurring her vision. I won't. Far off, the sound of more horses rose. The girl pressed her hand to Colt's heart. Please, she whispered. You can't die here. Colt Mercier's eyes softened. Reckon there's worse places. Then the wind carried his last breath into the dust. The plains were quiet again, too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after everything that could break already has. Éliane Rousse stood alone in the canyon, the wind brushing her hair, the dust settling around Colt Mercier's still body, the man who had stopped when no one else would, the man who gave her back her courage. She knelt beside him, pressing her forehead to his coat. You said no one's forgotten, she whispered. Then don't be, Colt, don't be. For a long time she just knelt there, a child in the ruins of an old man's redemption. Then finally she rose, wiped her tears, and turned her gaze toward the horizon. The box felt heavier now, not with what it held, but with what it meant. By nightfall she reached the river. Moonlight shimmered on its surface, silver and silent. She set the box down, her fingers tracing the carvings on its lid. There were markings she hadn't noticed before, faint, glowing, when the light touched them just right. Words in her mother's hand carved deep, for the day the plains remember. She hesitated, then opened the box. Inside was not gold, not a weapon, not even a map this time. It was a letter wrapped in faded cloth and sealed with wax, the wax marked by the symbol of a white star over a red horizon. Her hand shook as she broke the seal. To whoever finds this, the blood spilled across these lands was not for greed, but for remembrance. The Crimson Law was born from the ashes of good men, twisted by power, fed by fear. Inside this box is the proof of their crimes, names, orders, ledgers soaked in the lives they took. Let this truth ride farther than I ever could. If you are my daughter, Éliane, run to the North Hills. Find the old mine at Côte de Roche. Beneath the chapel there lies the voice of the plains. Tell them I never gave up on mercy. Mara Rousse. Éliane's breath caught. Her mother hadn't hidden gold. She'd hidden truth, enough to burn the Crimson Law down to its roots. Suddenly, the sound of snapping twigs broke the stillness. She spun around. A shadow emerged from the dark, a man, tall, cloaked, with a face she recognized too late. It was the last of the Crimson Riders, the one Colt hadn't killed. His arm was bandaged, his eyes burning with hate. Thought you'd get away, little ghost, he snarled. Give me the box. Éliane backed toward the river's edge, clutching it tight. My mother died for this, she said. You'll have to kill me too. He smirked. Gladly. He raised his gun, and for a moment she thought it was over. Then a sound cut through the air, a single gunshot. The man's eyes went wide before he fell backward into the water. Éliane froze. Smoke drifted through the moonlight, and there, at the ridge above, stood a silhouette she knew by heart. A hat brim low, a revolver still smoking in one hand. Colt Mercier, alive. He climbed down slow, his face pale, blood crusted on his sleeve. Told you, he rasped, voice low as thunder. I wasn't riding away. Éliane ran to him, tears cutting clean lines through the dirt. You shouldn't be alive. He gave a faint, tired grin. Ain't the first time someone said that. She held up the letter, the moonlight catching her trembling hands. She left proof, Colt, enough to stop them all. He looked toward the horizon, the North Hills calling like a promise. Then, that's where we ride. The wind stirred again, carrying the scent of dust and blood and the faintest hint of redemption. And somewhere in that wide, endless silence, the plains began to remember. The wind sang that night, a low, sorrowful hum across the open land like the world itself was breathing old memories. Colt and Éliane rode north, beneath a pale, silver moon, their silhouettes trailing long across the grass. The night was cold, and every star above them felt like an eye, watching. Colt's wounds still bled through his sleeve, but he didn't speak of pain. He rode steady, one hand tight on the reins, the other resting on the box between them. "You still got that letter?" he asked. Éliane nodded, her voice small but certain. "I've memorized every word." "Good," Colt muttered. "Words are bullets, sometimes. The right ones hit harder than lead." They reached Côte de Roche by dawn. The hills rose from the earth like the ribs of a sleeping giant, sharp, ancient, and silent. At their heart stood the ruins of an old chapel, stone walls broken but proud, its steeple leaning toward heaven like a sinner begging forgiveness. The door creaked when Éliane pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of dust, wax, and something faintly sweet. Old wildflowers dried in the corners. Sunlight streamed through a hole in the roof, painting the floor in gold. "It's here," she whispered. "Mother said the voice lies beneath." Colt scanned the ground until he saw it, a trap door near the altar, half covered in rubble. He kicked the stones aside, pried the door open, and a rush of cold air rose from the dark below. "You sure about this?" he asked. Éliane looked at him, her face pale but determined. "You said nobody's truly forgotten. Then let's remember." They descended the narrow steps, the light fading with each step. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of iron and earth. At the bottom, they found a tunnel, carved deep into stone, lined with wooden beams and old lanterns. Colt lit one, the flame flickering weakly. "Stay close." The tunnel stretched on, winding like a buried serpent, until it opened into a vast cavern. The walls shimmered faintly, veins of quartz catching the lantern's glow. And in the center stood something neither of them expected, a great iron vault, its door sealed tight, carved with the same markings as the box. Éliane stepped closer, tracing her fingers over the symbols. "It's the same writing," she murmured, "the same as my mother's hand." Then softly from somewhere deep within the walls came a sound, a low, echoing hum, like voices whispering through stone. Colt froze. "You hear that?" Éliane nodded slowly. "It's words. I can almost make them out." She pressed her ear to the rock. Her eyes went wide. "Their names, Colt. Thousands of them." He frowned. "Names of what?" "Not what," she said. "Who?" The voices rose, men, women, children, a chorus of ghosts whispering their own remembrance. Colt stepped back, hat in hand. "Your mother didn't just hide proof," he said quietly. "She buried the truth itself." The vault trembled as if it had heard him. A faint red light pulsed behind the iron door, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Éliane stumbled backward, clutching her chest. "It's calling," she gasped. "It wants to be opened." Colt caught her arm. "Whatever's in there, it ain't meant for this world." Tears glistened in her eyes. "Then why did she leave it for me?" He looked at her and really looked. "Because she knew you'd be brave, enough to decide what the world deserves to remember." The hum deepened, the light grew stronger, spilling through the cracks in the door like blood through a wound. Colt drew his revolver, though he knew it would do no good. "If we open that vault," he said, "nothing stays buried." Éliane stepped forward anyway. Her hand trembled as she placed the wooden box against the iron seal. The markings began to glow, spreading like veins of fire. Then the door of the vault began to move. Stone groaned, air screamed. Light flooded the cavern, swallowing everything in blinding white. When it cleared, Éliane stood before a vast wall of shimmering crystal, and inside it, faintly visible, were faces, countless faces, frozen in the glass, each one whispering in unison. Colt fell to one knee, awe and dread fighting in his chest. "Good God!" Éliane reached out, her hand brushing the cold surface. A single tear slipped down her cheek. The voice of the plains, she whispered. It's them, every soul the crimson law ever silenced. The cavern trembled again, and the voices began to rise, louder, stronger, filled with sorrow and fury. Colt turned toward her, shouting over the noise. You open that door, you'll wake them all. I know, she cried, but they deserve to be heard. And with that, Éliane Rousse pressed her palm to the crystal wall, and the plains began to scream. The air split like thunder, light poured from the crystal wall, spilling into every crack of the cavern. The ground trembled beneath Colt's boots, and the sound, that terrible, beautiful sound, rose like the roar of 1,000 storms. Éliane stood at the heart of it all, her hair whipping in the wind, eyes wide with awe and terror. The crystal globe with faces, men, women, children, flickering like candles trapped in ice. Their whispers had become voices now. Their voices had become a single cry. Remember us. Colt staggered forward, his hand outstretched. Éliane, stop it. It's too much. She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. They were buried, alive in silence, Colt. My mother said they deserved a voice. This is it. The crystal cracked, thin spider webs of light snaking outward, each one pulsing red like veins of blood. The noise deepened until it was no longer just sound. It was grief itself echoing through bone and stone. Suddenly Colt saw it, flashes in the light, burning houses, screaming children, red-scarved riders firing into the night. The truth of the Crimson Law laid bare, forced upon the world like judgment. By God, he whispered, she turned the dead into witnesses. The light surged. Colt shielded his eyes. Éliane cried out as the force lifted her off her feet, the wooden box disintegrating in her hands. The letter, her mother's letter, burned to ash, the words dissolving into the air. Then, just as suddenly as it began, silence. The cavern fell still. The light faded. Éliane collapsed, her small frame trembling, eyes glassy and distant. Colt caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her gently onto the cold stone. The crystal wall was gone, shattered into dust. But outside the cave, something had changed. They emerged into daylight, and the world was different. The sky burned crimson at the horizon, and far across the plains, windstorms swirled with glowing dust. The voices, faint but clear, rode the wind like a hymn. The plains remember, Éliane whispered weakly. Colt looked toward the south and saw fire rising from the distant camps of the Crimson Law. Horses panicked, men shouted, the wind carried whispers that turned to screams. The dead were speaking to the living now. Your mother did it, Colt said softly. She gave them their justice. Éliane tried to smile, her lips pale. She gave them peace. But Colt's face darkened. Peace never comes free, child. In the distance, the storm grew. Walls of red dust rolling toward them, alive with flickering shadows. Colt could see shapes forming in the haze. Riders, hundreds of them, ghostly figures riding side by side. The plains remember, they chanted, voices echoing like thunder. Éliane clung to Colt's arm. What do we do? He drew his revolver, the one that had ended more lives than he could count, and stared at it a long moment. Then he holstered it. We ride, he said, but this time, not away. The storm closed in, swallowing the horizon. The ground quaked, the air shimmered with the cries of the forgotten. Colt lifted Éliane onto his horse and swung up behind her. If the plains want a voice, he said, tightening the reins, then let's give them one worth listening to. They rode straight into the storm, dust and fire and ghosts all around, as the voices rose in a final furious chorus. And somewhere in that red whirlwind, the cowboy and the girl vanished. Two living souls carried into legend by the dead who finally spoke. They rode through fire, through dust, through memory itself. The storm swallowed Colt Mercier and Éliane Rousse whole, light and shadow twisting around them, whispering, pulling. The horse beneath them was no longer flesh, but flame and wind. carrying them through a world that wasn't the plains anymore. It was between. The air shimmered with the faces of the lost, drifting past like smoke. Some smiled, some wept, but none were silent. Colt held Éliane close, his hand firm on the reins that glowed faintly blue. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Somewhere between life and what comes after," he said. "Ain't the first time I've been close." Ahead, through the swirling haze, shapes began to form, ghostly riders in rows, their red scarves tattered, their eyes hollow, the crimson law, stripped of power, bound in eternity. And at their head rode a woman in white, hair black as coal, eyes burning like stars. Éliane gasped. "Mother!" Colt's breath caught in his throat. The widow of Saint-Denis rode closer, her face soft and unbroken by time. "You shouldn't have come here," she said gently, her voice carrying through the storm like a hymn. Colt dismounted slowly, hat in hand. Couldn't let her ride alone. Mara Rousse smiled sadly. "You never could." Éliane ran to her, tears spilling freely. "You left me?" she cried. "You left me in the ashes." Mara knelt, her hands cupping her daughter's face. "No, my heart. I stayed in every whisper of the wind, in every grain of dust that carried your name. The world forgot us, but you remembered." Behind them the storm rumbled, the spirits of the plains swirling higher, their voices growing faint. Colt stepped closer. "They won't rest till justice is done." Mara turned to him, her expression heavy with knowing. Justice was never the goal, Colt. It was remembrance. She looked around at the storm, at the faces, the fire, the light. They just wanted to be known again, to not vanish into the silence. Éliane looked up. "Then what happens now?" Her mother touched her heart. "Now you carry them, not their pain, but their truth." The light began to fade. One by one, the spirits bowed their heads and vanished into the wind. The plains grew quiet again, soft, golden, eternal. Mara's figure shimmered. "Go home, my daughter," she whispered, "and tell their stories. Keep the voice alive." Éliane reached out. "Will I ever see you again?" Mara smiled, fading. "Every time the wind remembers." And she was gone. Colt stood silent, the brim of his hat low, his heart heavier than ever, but lighter too, in a way he couldn't name. Éliane turned to him, eyes bright, with both loss and purpose. "What about you?" she asked softly. "Will you come back with me?" He smiled faintly. "Reckon I'm part of the story now, same as the rest." Before she could speak, the wind rose again, wrapping around him like a living thing, his outline blurred, fading into dust and light. "Tell him I stopped," he said, his voice breaking the silence one last time. "Tell him that's what made the difference." Then Colt Mercier was gone, a whisper carried into the horizon. Years passed. The war faded, the towns rebuilt, and legends turned to stories whispered over campfires. In the quiet town of Saint-Denis, now reborn from ashes, a small woman with dark hair stood before a classroom full of children. Her name was Éliane Mercier Rousse. She held a worn revolver in one hand and a tattered red scarf in the other. "These belonged to a man who didn't ride away," she told them, "a man who believed the forgotten deserved to be heard." The children listened wide-eyed as she spoke, of dust and courage, of voices rising through the plains, of a world that once forgot and then remembered. When she finished, she walked outside, her boots crunching over dry earth. The wind blew gentle and warm, carrying whispers across the fields, soft, familiar, eternal. She closed her eyes and smiled. "Thank you, Colt," she murmured. "You stopped." Far away on the horizon, a lone figure on horseback moved through the sunset, just a shadow against the fire-colored sky. But Éliane knew the cowboy was still riding, and somewhere the plains were still listening.